Hello? Rescue hooks to rescue, Mayday! Get ahead, West. Fast Mayday, what's your location? Get the panel out of here, hurry up! We need radio silence, I need water in that 2.5 inch line. 48 inch water in a 2.5 inch line. To the rope, to the rope. 35 in the rear, 35 in the rear.
Welcome to the Emergency Traffic Podcast. Well, hello there, and welcome back to the Emergency Traffic Podcast, where we review firefighter line of duty death reports to discuss and learn from these tragic events. This week's episode is number 64 as we begin our 4th season of the podcast. Before I get to the episode details, a few words and thoughts to all the people, especially firefighters and emergency managers, working the catastrophic wildland interface fires in California. I've been following the media reports and listening to some of the radio traffic on the scanner. Wow, unbelievable the size and scope of these fire operations, and thankfully no firefighter fatalities have been reported yet, although there's been numerous injuries that have occurred. For episode 64, this incident occurred just a few years ago in 2020 in a rural area of Missouri, a typical type of call we could all face anywhere in North America. There are numerous lessons to be learned in this incident that killed a firefighter. I will bring in Doug and Denis now and get on with the episodes. Thank you for listening. Hello, Denis and Doug. How are you guys doing today?
Excellent. How are you, Paul?
Good, good. It's raining here in central Alberta.
Yes, enjoying your non-traditional winter?
Yeah. Getting a few days of warmth, which is nice. I'm sure it'll get cold again. We're keeping Doug up. He didn't get enough sleep.
No, I actually didn't. I didn't sleep too bad last night. Just didn't sleep long enough, you know.
Okay.
Kids are always in there waking you up, and
Yep.
I mean, you can't remember the last time I wasn't tired.
Yeah. Well, that'll go another 20 years, and you'll be able to catch up.
And then I'll be like you and just forget that I'm tired.
Oh, ouch! Yeah, nasty.
But yeah, I'm good. Like you said, enjoying the milder weather that we're used to in January here, and just following this LA conflagration or the multiple conflagrations that are going on, and thinking about it in local terms. Like we said, what would it look like if all those resources were here? I know it would look like a complete shit show, but
yeah. Well, we've all been, I have, and I know Doug has, we've been listening to the radio traffic on Broadcastify from the command channel of the Palisades fire, and yeah, what did you say, 350 engines today, a dozen water tenders,
and that's just one of the fires. They got
that's one of the 7
fires going on there. Yeah, and I found it interesting too. I was listening to the Palisades command channel, but I also had the LA County regular dispatch channel open. That's what the news doesn't report, right? And the general public doesn't get is like, yes, they have this huge issue they're dealing with, but the gas leaks and the wires down and the cardiac arrests and the traffic accidents, they don't stop. They keep happening. So you also have to worry about the normal stuff. And yeah, it's funny when they dispatch. It sounded to me, I don't know anything about them, but it sounded to me like if a station was going to a different station's area, they would say like, engine 1, you're going to blah, blah, blah in station 2's response area. 4 out of every 5 calls was a station going to a different station's response area. So I'm sure they were stretched pretty thin with what they left behind. I don't know where all the stations are, so I didn't know enough about that, but they're stretched pretty thin with what they left behind.
They're getting called for a structure fire. Now, normally in LA County, LA City, or here, that'd be 2 or 3 engines, a rescue, a ladder, a chief, whatever, and they're sending 1 engine to respond to a structure fire because that's all they got.
Yeah, I heard one call was like, engine blah, 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 and foam 1. You're going to a gas station fire. Have fun.
Yeah.
Alone. But I will say, all this talks we've had on this podcast, and I've had with you, Paul, in real life about how I don't like quints. I was almost convinced listening that it's a good thing that they had quints there because it gives them the flexibility to send all the engines to the wildland fire and leave the quints behind to do structural stuff. Because lots of the calls was just a quint going to it. And like you wouldn't think that LA or LA County needs, I would argue, like, no, you have enough engines. But I guess when you have a fire that has 350 engines at it and four more fires, and then you need something for all the regular stuff. Like I didn't hear too many engines going to calls. It was all quints and USARs, which I think is their heavy rescue, and there wasn't too many engines left behind.
Interesting. Well, that's why little towns buy quints, right? Because
Yeah.
it can do more than one thing. Denis is shaking his head.
Well, it's a compromise. I mean, I don't know if you're going to buy quints because you might have a massive, conflagration. I don't know if that would be enough of a driving factor, but
In
I
LA
get what
County,
Doug is
it's
saying.
not that you might have it. In LA County, you're gonna have it.
Yeah. Well, that kind of brings me to a point I was noticing, and I was watching some of the news, and they were showing some aerial photography of entire subdivisions burned out, and those subdivisions were incinerated by the wildland fire along their boundaries. But once it got into the subdivision, that was no longer really a wildland fire that
Right.
caused the issues. It's a conflagration in 160 km/h winds, and frankly, you could have that in any built up community, and the fire spreads from building to building to building because the flames are not going upwards, they're going sideways.
Yep.
And they're taking out fences, they're taking out outbuildings, they're taking out homes. If your home is not structurally hardened against exposure fires and all those flying embers, and I know in the fires we had here 18 months ago, I saw some pieces that were like this big, 2x4, like a foot long, tumbling down the road in the wind on fire. And if that landed anywhere like in your roof or on your house, chances are that you were going to lose your home. And consider, streets full of those houses throwing that stuff off. And you can see, how do you stop that, right? Like you need
Yeah.
multiple engine companies. Really, you couldn't get ahead of it. All you could do is triage, right? Get the ones that were in the incipient stage, maybe, and then hope that there isn't a reoccurring ignition source that flies on the house after you've
You
left.
have to almost just be thinking 3 steps ahead of the fire and say, I know that block's already on fire. This block's gonna be on fire. We're stopping it 3 blocks ahead and
Yeah.
letting it get to us, right?
The first night, there was a lot of that on the radio the first night. Like I listened to the command channel, and of course I'm a command guy and I teach incident command and stuff. And their incident command was really good. They were really diligent on the radio to be succinct and direct. But yeah, there was a lot of that. The commander, the ops section chief actually was making divisions up on the fly. You could tell he was looking at a map and telling division whatever, you're over here and you're up to this road, and then that's division such and such. And then they were responding to spot fires after the fact. The flame front had gone through, and then things were igniting an hour or two later.
Yeah. Latent fires. Yeah.
Yeah, Denis, you talked about that. I think we were texting the other day and saying how you saw houses go up like the next day or 12 hours after the flame front went through. All of a sudden, Joe's house caught fire because there was something smoldering, in the bushes for on the eaves or something for a day.
Yeah. Yeah, that can happen. So that's kind of like a brand patrol, right? But one of the other challenges
Yep.
they were having, and ignoring the shots from the incoming administration, one of the issues they were having there were so many hydrants open that the system couldn't keep adequate residual pressures in the system, so they
Yep.
were having water flow issues.
Yeah.
Yeah, I heard one of the problems with that too was like this Palisades neighborhood is kind of the end of the line. So you're getting like the small end of the pipe kind of thing, right?
Sure.
So
All the home burns down. What happens? The water pipes are leaking, right?
sure, yeah.
10,000, 15,000 structures with 1-inch lines wide open flowing
Right.
water. Well, imagine how much that sucks
That's
away.
a lot of water.
So you got to have,
They didn't start really asking for a lot of water tenders until like the next morning almost. They started like all of a sudden you could hear on the radio, we need tenders because there's no water in the system anymore. It's just hey, house goes down. I mean, there was a video actually on the news last night. Some news station was out there and they saw the water softener and the water's just pouring out of the water softener in this burnt out house, right? Well, How many houses in Palisades alone was 5,300 last night, they said, were destroyed.
So as an incident commander, you're having to make decisions.
And there's 2 other fires on the other side of town that are just as bad that also need water.
Yep.
Yeah. So as an IC, you're making decisions like, do I shut off this section of the water grid? Well, that'll stop all those parasitic leaks, but it also shuts off your hydrants. So
Yep.
now you need to replace that with mobile water supply, and I'm going to shut down the power systems. Well, in many cases, the power poles, if they're above ground, have caused shorts and the power system's gone down. So how many substations do you have that supply booster pressure to the water systems, and is that effective?
Yeah.
And so you need a whole different section of your command system that's entirely looking at water supply and all the consequences and planning. Right, that's the planning, the big P.
How bad would saltwater, ocean water be on a fire pump?
It's not terrible for a short period of time. You just got to clean it out after.
Like, could they just draft out of the ocean and pump?
I'm sure they did.
Yeah.
Yep, they probably did. Yeah, that's what I would consider doing. I know San Francisco, all their pumps can draft out of the ocean because of earthquakes.
Well, San Francisco has like their own water supply.
They have a separate system. Yeah, they do. Well, we could probably go on about
for 9/11. They drafted for like months because
the fireboat came and fought and pumped water.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, I was going to say New York. That's a plan.
Yeah, we could probably go on about the LA fires forever. What else? The tragic death in Honolulu of a firefighter this week as well. And then, Doug, you were mentioning the 3 firefighters burned in Houston in a rapid fire event of some sort.
And very close to being more LODDs like the guy in Honolulu. Their gear and SCBAs were melting in that fire, so they were very close.
Apparently, apartment building of some sort of multifamily. That's what I heard.
What I saw in the news and what I saw in the trades wasn't a high building, but it was a large building. And there was a partial roof collapse, and it caught 2 firefighters in one corner of the structure. One managed to get out, or they got him out by the skin of his teeth, and the other one they did not.
And then, Doug, you mentioned Chicago.
Yeah, Chicago.
Chicago and their trucks are out of trucks.
Yeah, I just stumbled upon this Facebook group, which looks like you joined it too or whatever, but they're posting about how dire their needs are, and that one post was the birthday cake for the reserve engine that was 30 years old. Happy 30th birthday.
Was that the one with the Mercedes?
It was a real basic, like Spartan Advantage with a real basic body on it and like extremely simple truck. And somebody had pinned a Mercedes logo on the grill. I don't know. Maybe it's got Mercedes power. They did that for a short time. So maybe.
Yes, but old and simple is sometimes better.
What scares me is today's brand new truck going to be around in 30 years to use it as a reserve? I don't think so.
Oh no, definitely not.
It's so tough with the new trucks. One of the biggest problems is the electronic controls for the engine and the interface with the electronic controls for the aerial or the fire pump system. And as trucks age, those controls become out of date and you can't buy them anymore. Like governors for the old early 2000 engines, you can't buy them. They don't make them. And so, like, the engine's out of service while you send it back to the manufacturer, fire research or class 1 to get it rebuilt, and your truck's down for 3 months.
Transmission controllers too, TCMs. Yeah, there's a guy in the U.S. that rebuilds all that stuff. I see his videos quite a lot.
Yeah.
My thoughts are that's going to become a much bigger business.
And it's not just Chicago.
It's everywhere, Doug.
Yeah, I mean, every department is struggling with. We're using more spares. Our spares are older. Our new trucks are out of service more. And then it's 1,000 days for a new truck from the day you say, yes, I want it. And it's a year before you get to that point. And
if you want a custom, yes.
Well, I mean, all the big cities, aside from the couple that Paul know, are buying custom trucks.
No, it's not custom. I mean, it's customized custom trucks. The ones with all the features that you got to have. Yeah, those are the ones that have got delayed.
It's the same in the automotive industry. I mean, we've gone to so many features on your car, your vehicle, your over-the-road truck, and then these features, of course, break down. Some of it's due to environmental concerns. Some of it's due to safety. In Canada, you can't buy a car without a backup camera because so many people have been backed over. So when those things quit working,
Is that
then
the
you
reason?
have to work around it. Yeah, there was too many fatalities. So the Transport Canada said you got to have a backup camera. But, so, Doug likes to slam a lot of the European aerials because those systems are already built into them. But they do require more maintenance, more sensors, more computer programs. And the North American aerials are going down the same road. And then the techs go. I had a tech. I'm on a tech group on Facebook, and the truck keeps going out of pump gear, and they can't figure out why. Whenever the guy gets out of the driver's seat, or you shake the truck, it falls out of pump gear, and they're trying to figure out why. And he's out on Facebook going like, anybody got any ideas? I've checked this. I said to him, maybe the seatbelt sensor or the seat pressure sensor is throwing it off or something. They're grasping at straws trying to fix this electronic gremlin.
Exactly. I got those interlocks on my tractor, for God's sakes.
Yeah,
If I'm driving my tractor, working with it, and I just stretch like this back in my seat, the engine shuts off. I go, what the hell? I know now. I got to be quick.
Well, I guess we better get back to the episode here. This week we are going to go to Peculiar, Missouri. Back in 2020, January of 2020, a 30-year-old career firefighter died after falling into a basement due to a floor collapse at a residential structure fire. On January 5th of 2020, a 30-year-old career firefighter died after falling into the basement due to a floor collapse at a residential modular home structure fire. The firefighter was operating a hose line with a captain in the kitchen when the floor collapsed. The firefighter fell into the basement. First, a little bit about the fire department. The fire department is designated as a fire protection district, which is a geographical area of a town or county that receives contract fire protection. The administrative board can create fire protection districts in this state that consolidates adjoining fire protection districts or alter the boundaries of a fire protection district or dissolve a fire protection district of its own motion by a petition. A Missouri fire protection district is a political subdivision of the state. The fire protection district in this case serves a district population of 8,900 residents in about 43 square miles. In 2020, this fire protection district answered 1,000 alarms for service, which included 90 fires, 660 EMS calls, and 259 automatic fire alarms or other calls, maybe accidents and stuff like that. The Fire Protection District operates 2 fire stations, providing basic life support, advanced life support, and transport capabilities. So they also provide what we would call in Canada ambulance service. Fire Station 51 has an engine, a medic unit, and a brush forestry truck. And Fire Station 51 also houses the administrative offices and has facilities to conduct training. Fire Station 52 is simply one engine and one medic unit, so a satellite station by the sounds of it. The Fire Protection District has 13 career members and 17 part-time paid members. The Fire Protection District has a paid fire chief, paid assistant fire chief, and a paid administrative assistant. There are 3 shifts, and each shift works 48 hours on, 96 hours off. The fire department provides electronic policy procedure manuals to each member at each fire station.
Some training, education, and professional development to this fire department. The Missouri Division of Fire Safety's Training and Certification Unit develops, provides, and oversees the training curriculum used regionally for firefighters, fire investigators, fire inspectors, officers, instructors, as well as emergency responders dealing with hazardous materials. Although certification is not mandatory in the state of Missouri, the Division of Fire Safety has issued more than 95,000 certifications at various levels to more than 36,000 individuals. The firefighter from Engine 52 had been a member of the Fire Protection District since November 2019. The firefighter had completed the following certifications: 1001, Firefighter 1 and 2, 472, Operations Pro Board, and Hazardous Materials Technician. Additional certifications included ICS 100, 200, ICS 700A, Interior Search and Rescue, Structural Fire Control, which is 16 hours, both of those. The company officer of Engine 51 had 9 years of service with the Fire Protection District and had worked as a paramedic for an EMS organization. He had completed the following certifications: NFPA 1001, Level 1 and 2, 472, Operations and Awareness. The fire chief for the incident commander had 26 years of experience. At the time of the incident, he had been the fire chief of the Fire Protection District for 9 months. He had 1001 Level 1 and 2, 472 Awareness and Operations, NFPA 1021, which is Fire Officer 1 and 2, NFPA 1031, Fire Inspector 1, and NFPA 1033, Fire Investigator 1.
So I'd like to point out that the firefighter who lost his life in this incident had only been with the department some 6 weeks or so, but he did have prior experience in another department. But imagine just being on the job 6 weeks and then getting killed.
Yeah, that's just,
what a shock that would be.
yep.
It would raise a lot of questions too, I'm sure.
It would, yeah. Okay, you don't know the people that well, the team you're working with, and all that kind of stuff. And
yeah, and I don't know if that's a factor in this incident, but we kind of discuss around that fact a little later on about accountability. So we're gonna a little review here of the building construction itself. So the structure involved in the incident was a modular home. Although I must say, from the Google Street View of this home, which I did look at, you wouldn't necessarily know that right away by looking at it. It just looked like a ranch-style bungalow. Anyway, modular homes are usually fabricated in sections at a factory, right? They're not built on site, they're built in a factory. So each section is built separately before it's shipped to the site for final assembly, where it's located, in other words. They're also sometimes called prefab, which is short for prefabricated homes. So they are manufactured, and modular dwellings are built off-site and may not have the same fire resistance as site-built structures. They may propagate fire rapidly due to the geometry of the building. These structures may be susceptible to early failure due to numerous lightweight building construction materials. Certainly, where modular components come together, there can be, voids, gaps.
And I just want to add here, we're now seeing modular construction in other types of buildings, such as hotels and stuff like that. There's several here in Alberta, little cities that I think even Vermilion, where the fire school is, there's a hotel they built there. I was taking my 1031, 1033, like the chief of this department, and they were building a modular hotel across the road. And so each module came as a piece, and then they assembled it all together on site. And again, the same kind of problems can occur with these modular built buildings.
I would also like to include in this discussion really panel-built structures, which aren't exactly modular from the point of view of being prefab off-site, but components like entire wall sections and so forth are brought in, or pieces of the wall, and erected on site. So you used to see that in concrete construction like tilt-ups, but you're seeing it much more now with combustible construction. So you'd have timber framing and cast in styrofoam insulation and so forth. And, these pieces are put up in panels and bolted together. So you get, I would think, some of the weaknesses that come from prefabricated construction are
when I was in high school,
but traits.
I was in high school and I built one of those. My social studies teacher hired me for a couple of summers, and he built a new house out at Springbank, and it was all panels. It came on a truck, and it was regular 2x4 construction, but panels with mineral wool insulation. But nowadays you're seeing it with styrofoam insulation, and it's going together like Lego blocks, if you will, or a whole piece, a wall and then another wall. Yeah. And a lot of odd features that we have to learn about. So we need to know as Brannigan says, know your enemy.
Yeah. So why that's important as a firefighter is you walk up to a structure and you think you're looking at one thing, but really you're not. Remember the discussion over lightweight I-beams, silent floors, and so forth?
Yep.
Similar thing from the point of view of, as the firefighter, you may not know that it isn't dimensional lumber that's holding that floor up. It's actually something entirely different. So you need to understand these things and treat them differently, or at least think in your head as you're going into this building, gee, I wonder if I should check that out. Anyway, we're going to continue on here. Modular homes are legally considered permanent construction, and they are required to be attached to a permanent foundation. They're also required to meet building codes too. So basements themselves are permanent structures that in most cases act as foundations for the modular home to be built on top of, and they sustain and distribute the weight of the building, as well as keeping ground moisture out of the building itself. Basements are usually built of concrete, although the materials and construction techniques utilized will depend on the location and specific requirements. In other words, anything you could find in a regular home, you could find underneath a modular home. Could be concrete block, could be brick, could be, any of those things. It could actually be, a basement that doesn't actually go into the ground very far. There are different types of basements, some built fully underground structures with no windows, which was the case here, while others are partially underground spaces with windows or even doors looking outside. The basement possibilities available for modular homes are just the same as those that are available for any other type of construction. So again, you're not necessarily going to know it's a modular home just by looking at the outside of it. Even if modular homes are built off-site, the foundations and basements are constructed on-site following the same building process that would be used under traditional construction techniques. The only access to a full basement in this particular incident was a standard door. And they say standard, but the door was actually below grade, and it was on the side Bravo at the Charlie corner. And so technically that's a walkout basement, but the door itself was below grade with a retaining wall and a set of stairs that traversed pretty much the whole Bravo side before you reached the ground level. So that actually is a bit of a factor in this fire.
It had me confused at first when I was reading it. I was going like, where is this door? Until I looked at the plans and figured it out. I didn't realize there was a walkout basement door below the home.
Yeah, there's actually, if you go to the NIOSH report, which is the source material for this, you'll find two separate floor plans. And it's not obvious at first what you're looking at because they're completely different. You go, what? Wait. But then you understand one's the main floor and the other one's the basement. Anyway, the dimension of this particular modular home in the incident was 52 foot 4 inches long and 26 foot 1 inches wide. So this is not a small residence. It's a good size. And approximately 1,352 square feet, single story, plus a basement. So how was this modular home built? It was sitting on a poured masonry foundation that had no windows, just that one door we talked about. It was supported on that foundation by about a dozen 8-inch tall I-beams that ran west to east. In other words, from the side Alpha back to the side Charlie. And that's in the narrow dimension. And then there is a single 10-inch I-beam that ran from side Bravo through to side Delta and came as part of the modular home itself. So that would be probably down pretty much the middle. And then there on top of that, there was an unknown number of 2x6 wooden joists that were sitting on top of those 8-inch beams. So this is basically like the floor joists of the home itself. The flooring that was sitting on top of those joists was a single layer 1-inch particle board placed on top of the wood joists. And the floor was covered with linoleum. So to compare that to a standard house construction, that 1-inch is pretty typical thickness, can be even sometimes only 3/4. And particle board or OSB board is commonly used in ordinary construction also. So not that unusual here. So the exterior walls were covered with light colored vinyl siding on the outside, and there was a gable roof, and it was with composite asphalt shingles.
The truss roof in this modular home was actually made with 2-inch by 2-inch finger jointed trusses. Now, I didn't know what this was until I looked at the picture. So the finger jointed wood trusses are an engineered wood product designed for residential light commercial applications. Instead of having the metal pressed gusset plates that we're used to on trusses, it didn't have the gusset plates. The ends of the trusses were actually fingered, like little fingers that went into the crossbar of the truss, which also had the same fingers corresponding. We'll post a picture on the socials, but I really wasn't familiar with these. I've been in the fire service for 37 years, and I didn't remember seeing this before until I saw the picture, and I went like, wow, I didn't know you could do that. So it didn't even have gusset plates. The trusses were just fingered. They had like 4 or 5 cuts on the end of the truss, and they were joined together that way. The trusses in this case, had charred only 1/2 inch, but they were badly bowed and failing after the fire.
Yeah. So unlike Paul, I have seen these trusses before, but they're pretty rare, I got to say. And I've seen them in prefabricated modular homes, interestingly.
Well, you're more knowledgeable and from Ontario, so you definitely would know more about it.
So for those of you out there who can't quite picture in your heads what this looks like, if you ever look at a regular truss right now, you will find that, for instance, the pieces of wood in that truss are not one continuous piece. They tend to be joined in sections. And if you look at how those sections are put together, they're like fingers. They interlock with each other at the ends and they hold together to make one piece. That is finger jointing. So imagine that connecting pieces of wood that are not end to end, but come in at various angles like a truss does. And that's what you got. That's how this truss was held together. Anyway, the flooring itself was, I'm going to elaborate a little more on that, was made of a single layer of MDF, medium density fiberboard, in its untreated state. Anyway, fiberboards really fare poorly when they get wet, swelling or even fracturing when exposed to even negligible amounts of water. Plus, they do deteriorate due to heat and with age because they're largely glue, right? So how your building or your house is maintained would have a big factor on how secure your floor is. Anyway, the fire in this particular case occurred between the joists and under the MDF flooring in about the area of the laundry room in the house. It says here it wasn't in the basement, but really it was between the basement and the first floor. It was in that void space.
So to be clear here, it's MDF, not OSB, oriented strand board, which is glued pieces of wood. MDF is really glued sawdust. Usually a lot of cabinetry is made of these now, and also the baseboards in new homes, all MDF. And yeah, it doesn't like water at all.
No, really swells up. It's nasty stuff from that point of view. So a concrete stairwell that we'd mentioned earlier that went to the basement was located on the north end of the structure, the Bravo end, and was the only access to the basement. So there was not access interior to the home. In other words, this basement was never intended to be an occupied space, not really. Mm-hmm. So there was a wooden deck in front of the house on the Alpha side that had a pretty large wooden gazebo on top of it. And the deck itself was attached to the house, although the gazebo stood off a little bit. So there was electricity and there was LP, propane, in other words, gas. Those were the utilities into the house at the time. So just a little bit about layout. On the first floor, there were 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, a combination living room, dining room, kitchen type place. So it's kind of an open plan. There was a utility room just off the kitchen that had a washer and dryer. And on the Delta side, there was an exterior covered porch. And there were also various closets inside. So the floor plan of the utility room where the fire was initially reported, that's where it was noticed because the fire was below that area. I guess the heat and smoke were coming up. So the residents reported the fire as being in the utility room, and it was located just off the kitchen towards the Delta end of the house, but towards the Delta Charlie corner, more like. The basement of the structure was a living area with a bedroom and a full bath. And later on in the fire, what happened was the floor collapsed. And the firefighter from Engine 52, the gentleman we mentioned earlier, he fell into the basement and landed on a floor, the basement floor, below where he fell in and near a workbench.
Now, technically, you couldn't have a bedroom in the basement because there was no windows, but it had one anyway. So upon arrival, here's our little virtual 360 just to help you visualize the house. Fire crews found a single-story home with this Type 5 construction, basically wood-framed, with vinyl siding and a gable roof. And from the picture, you can't tell it was a prefab home. It looked like any other home. The home was set back from the street on a large lot-style subdivision. The home had a long driveway on the Bravo side with about half a dozen vehicles parked in the driveway and a detached garage to the rear of the home. So way back in the backyard. The Alpha side
and
of the
a car
home,
in the front yard too, by the way.
Oh, yeah. The rear of the home, a little indicator here, a whole bunch of cars parked there in the driveway and even one on the lawn. The Alpha side of the home had a wooden fence and a covered deck with a gazebo in the front of the main door. There was also a large bay window to the right of the main entrance, which was that kitchen, dining, living area. On the Bravo end of the Alpha side, what appears to be a bedroom window. The Bravo side had a fence with steps along the building to the door from the basement near that Bravo Charlie corner. The Charlie side of the home had a backyard where the garage and shed were located. The Delta side has a large covered porch inside the fence, full height lattice on the Alpha end to the eaves of the extended gable roof. So the actual roof line of the home extended over this large covered deck that's about 8 or 10 feet wide. So you couldn't even tell. I didn't know that was a deck at first looking at the pictures until I investigated, because it had the lattice on the one end too. So it's kind of hard to visualize this house from the street. The Fire Protection District operates, as we mentioned before, 2 stations. It has 3 paid firefighters per shift, one of which is a company officer, and there's 3 shifts, each shift working that 4896 schedule. The Fire Protection District also has a paid chief, a paid assistant fire chief, and an administrative assistant, 13 career members, and 17 part-time on-call, as we mentioned. Staffing on the day on the fire on Engine 51 was an officer, the chauffeur, and a firefighter. Staffing on Engine 52 was a chauffeur and a firefighter, so just 2 on Engine 52. Medic 52 was also staffed with 2 EMTs. Fire apparatus that responded prior to the floor collapse from the 2 local stations and 2 mutual aid stations are as follows. There were 2 engines with 3 people each, 1 engine with 2, that was probably at 52, and 1 engine with 4. 2 tenders with 1 person each, because it's a rural area, probably no hydrants. The 3 chief officers all responding on their own, and 1 rescue squad with a medic unit with 2, for a total of 23 firefighters on scene, which isn't bad for a rural call. That's pretty good. PPE, NIOSH investigators inspected and photographed all the turnout gear and SCBA worn by the deceased firefighter at the time of the fire. The firefighter was wearing a station work uniform, full turnout gear, SCBA with face piece. All the PPE equipment was compliant with NFPA 1971. Because the turnout gear was not considered a contributing factor in this incident, investigators conducted no further evaluation or testing. No evidence was found that the SCBA contributed to the fatality either. The weather at the time of the call, January 5th, 2020, was 50 degrees Fahrenheit. 27 degrees was the dew point. The humidity was at 41%. Winds were out of the north-northwest at 24 miles per hour, so a little bit windy, gusting to 33.
So just for orientation, Paul, I was looking at the compass map of this, and really the wind was on the Alpha Bravo corner slightly. So later in the fire, they opened that basement door, which is directly on the windward side. So we've had a number of conversations about wind-driven fires, and so you got a 33-mile-an-hour wind that's impacting on your open doorway here.
Yeah, it's like 50K for us Canadians. Yeah, over 50K.
Investigation on January 5th, 2020, 30-year-old career firefighter died after falling into the basement due to a floor collapse at a residential structure fire. At 11:04, the Fire Protection District was dispatched to report of a dryer fire. The occupants tried to fight the fire before calling 911, which caused an estimated 6 to 9 minute delay in notifying the fire department. At 11:13, Engine 51, with 3 on board, advised there was light smoke showing from a single-family residence, and Engine 51 was investigating. As we said, the winds were out of the north-northwest, from the Bravo to Delta sides, 24 miles an hour, gusting to 33. The wind did not impact the fire until after the floor collapsed and the roof and all windows were vented. Yeah, and so, that fight the fire, that delay, what's the saying? Fire grows, multiplies how fast? Every minute or something? It doubles in size or triples in size? Yeah, I think they say it doubles in size every 30 seconds if there's fuel for it.
So anyway, the captain of Engine 51, when he arrived, he was the first in officer. He started to do his 360-degree walk around the structure, which is very good. But the captain got all the way around to the Charlie Delta corner, but couldn't get down the Delta side because there was a fence in the backyard, so he couldn't get past that. I mean, could have broken his way through, but not something you would do normally. So the Engine 51 officer advised that smoke was showing at that time from the basement door, which again is on the Bravo Charlie corner. So the chauffeur from Engine 1 then stretched an 1 3/4 hose line down to the basement steps, and then stretched a second 1 3/4 hose line to the front door of the structure on the Alpha side. So there was a door on the Alpha side, and it was more towards the Bravo part of that side. The captain and the firefighter from engine 51 then took the hose line to the top of the basement stairs and then went down the steps and made entry into the basement through the basement door. The basement door was open at that time, had been left open, I guess, by the occupants. There was light gray smoke showing from the basement door. Now, remember, the wind's at your back and it's blowing 33 miles an hour. The time was approximately 11:15 hours. And this call came in at 11:04, so we're already 10 minutes into the call. Engine 51 was only able to proceed a few feet into the basement due to the excessive clutter conditions. There might have been hints that this would be a cluttered house because the exterior of the home was badly cluttered also. If you do go online and look at some of the photos, you'll see that there's a lot of stuff going on in front of this home, behind this home, and beside this home. Anyway, the captain did have a thermal imager which showed nothing that he could see. There was smoke in the basement, but no heat or fire. So you have to ask the question, why is that? Maybe the fire was behind a partition or something like that. Engine 51 did not flow water when they were down in the basement. They couldn't see the fire. Engine 51 then left the basement, but they left the nozzle at the basement door, so at the bottom of the stairs, in other words. So Engine 52 with a power of 2 and Medic 52 with a power of 2 then arrived on scene at around 11:16 hours, so about a minute after these guys attempted their entry. Engine 52 parked behind Engine 51, probably in the driveway, although they don't clarify that. The chauffeur from Engine 51 then connected a 3-inch supply line to Engine 52 for water, so they were nursing. Chief 51 then arrived on scene and assumed command at 11:17 hours. So we're 13 minutes into the call. Engine 51 exited the basement, left the hose line at the basement door, as we mentioned, and then they moved around to the front yard, where Engine 51 met the chief and advised him of the conditions in the basement. Command advised Engine 1 that the occupants had told him that the fire was in the laundry room behind the dryer, which would be on the first floor. So in other words, towards the delta end we talked about. Command then ordered 51 to take the hose line at the front door, which had been already laid by the chauffeur, and to make their way to the laundry room. So that would be in the door and to the right, basically. So Engine 51 made entry through the front door at approximately 11:18 hours. So that's 14 minutes after they received the call. The firefighter from Engine 52 met 51 at the front door, and the captain from 51 and the firefighter from 52 made entry to the house. The firefighter from Engine 51 remained at the front door to hold the screen door open and to jack feed hose into the building. The firefighter from 52 entered the front door and made a left. So he was, I guess, starting off with left-hand searches, and went into the front bedroom by himself, which clearly is to the left of the door. Then he returned and moved towards the kitchen. The captain followed the hose line in through the front door, and the captain was behind the firefighter from Engine 52 as he entered the kitchen area. The firefighter from Engine 52 was flowing water. So this firefighter we're talking about is the firefighter that loses his life. At 11:19 hours, again 15 minutes in, Battalion 82, Engine 81, Tanker 81, Squad 82 are dispatched to this incident. So this is like basically your second alarm. At 11:19 hours and 49 seconds, so almost 11:20 hours, Chief 41 and Pumper 43 arrive on scene. Upon arrival, Chief 41 conducts a 360 size-up and does a risk assessment. Pumper 43 with a power of 4 was assigned to the hose line at the bottom of the basement steps. Pumper 43's assignment was to knock down any fire they noticed in the basement, but to do it from the doorway. Pumper 43 used a thermal imager in an effort to identify any fire in the basement. They noted high heat indicated at the ceiling above the doorway. Remember, the wind's still at their backs at this time, so it's feeding fresh air into the basement. Pumper 43 then backed outside the doorway and began to apply water on the ceiling immediately inside the door. They wouldn't have been able to back up very far because there's a well there. They're in this concrete
And this is at the
area
other end of the house. So
from the fire.
the fire is going back towards the entry of air. So, and I've seen that before where it'll get into that void space and then it'll actually go towards the wind to get air to burn that floor up.
Yeah, so that's an indication that the house is not ventilated, right? So your heat and gases are coming out high and your fresh air is going in low.
Yeah, in the basement.
That's right, in this case. So anyway, they continued to try to evaluate if the entry into a basement was acceptable or possible, I guess. The officer at Pumper 43 then requested a pike pole because he wanted to pull the ceiling in the basement. So clearly he didn't want anything falling behind him as he proceeded inwards. Chief 41 reported to command that heavy smoke was showing now from all sides of the structures. From the structure, I'm sorry. Utilities were electric and propane, as we mentioned, and the time now is approximately 11:22. So we're getting close to 20 minutes into the call. And remember, there was a significant amount of time at the beginning of this call where the occupants did their thing. So Engine 51 firefighter at the front door, who was standing at the door, stated to the captain of Engine 51 that was inside the doorway. The firefighter and officer both heard a pass alarm sounding, so the Engine 51 firefighter and the officer inside, and heard a lot of glass breaking. The officer went into the kitchen approximately 8 to 10 feet. The Engine 51 officer was then getting low on air, the interior was getting hot, and there was no visibility. The officer heard no radio traffic, tried to call command. The officer wanted the roof ventilated, but his portable radio, as it turned out, was in the off position. The noise increased and there was a crashing sound. The officer of Engine 51 said he felt like he was being hit by something, and then his facepiece came off. The officer called the firefighter from Engine 52 several times by name. So this, just to remind you, that firefighter from Engine 52 had proceeded into the kitchen and was on the nozzle. There was no response from the Engine 52 firefighter, who was the victim. The firefighter from Engine 52 had fallen into the basement due to a collapse of the first floor in the kitchen area, and that happened between 11:25 and 11:26 hours. Although I would comment here that nobody at the time knew that.
Yep.
So the officer called the Engine 51 firefighter to the front door to help him get out of the house. The Engine 51 officer then called a mayday over his radio, but the message didn't transmit. Remember, the radio was off. The officer heard a pass alarm and then lost the sound. The firefighter from Engine 51 went to Engine 51 and got 2 spare SCBA cylinders. So the captain and that Engine 51 firefighter who had been holding the door and jacking hose, they changed each other's cylinders. The time was now approximately 11:27, which is 24 minutes into the call. At 11:29 hours, the chauffeur of Engine 51 advised command that Engine 51 was now out of water. So that they haven't been flowing a lot of water at this point, obviously. Mutual aid tankers were starting now to arrive on scene. A mutual aid firefighter then found a fire hydrant approximately 300 to 400 feet north of the structure. The firefighter then drove Engine 52 to the hydrant. He laid a 5-inch supply line from Engine 51 to the hydrant, made the connection, charged the line, and pumped the secure water supply back to Engine 51. Somebody else want to read some? I got a lot of blue here.
At 11:29 hours, the captain of Engine 51 advised command that the firefighter from Engine 52 was still in the house in the kitchen, possibly trapped by a ceiling collapse. Pumper 43 was reassigned from the basement to the front door in an attempt to locate the firefighter from Engine 52. Pumper 43 repositioned to the front door for search operations. They followed the hose line advanced by the initial entry crew until it doubled back, possibly due to a loop placed on the hose line inside the structure. One of the firefighters from Pumper 43 grabbed the hose line, but it was uncharged. Pumper 43 moved towards the kitchen. Members stated they could hear a pass alarm sounding when they entered the front door. Using a tick, the officer of Pumper 43 began to advance into the kitchen a short distance beyond the hose line when the ceiling began to came down. This started to block their egress. The interior conditions began to deteriorate rapidly. The smoke turned from gray to black smoke under pressure. A layer of soot covered their face pieces and the lens of the tick, causing zero visibility, and the heat intensified. The officer of Pumper 43 called a mayday at 11:31. The officer of Pumper 43 called a mayday stating, "Extreme heat, structural collapse, and trapped." The front door was closed temporarily, trapping members of Pumper 43 inside the house. A member of Pumper 43 had gone outside but quickly opened the front door. It took about 45 seconds to get the other 3 members of Pumper 43 out of the structure safely. They were out of the structure at 11:32 and the mayday was cleared. At 11:34 hours, the structure was well involved. Command assembled 3 crews to staff hose lines and try to locate the missing firefighter from the exterior. 2 hose lines were operating on the Alpha side and 1 on the Delta side. All hose lines were operating from the exterior. At approximately 11:35, Pumper 27 arrived on scene. At approximately 11:36, Battalion 82, Engine 81, Tanker 81, and Squad 82 arrived on scene. Approximately 11:37, Pumper 27 made an attempt to enter the house through the front door to try to locate the firefighter from Engine 52. Due to the deteriorating conditions, the crew from Pumper 27 could not make entry and were driven out of the structure. At 11:38, Battalion 82 was assigned as a Rapid Intervention Group supervisor. They assigned Squad 82 to the roof for vertical ventilation. Engine 81 removed the kitchen bay window and cut the wall under the bay windows down to the floor, basically making another door. Upon removing the windows, Engine 81 discovered that a portion of the kitchen floor had collapsed. This confirmed that the firefighter from Engine 52 had fallen to the basement. A roof ladder was lowered into the basement from the bay window area through the collapsed area. Firefighters tried to go down the ladder to conduct a search, but they were unable to make it to the basement due to the intense heat conditions.
Wow. This just goes from bad to worse. I like the cut the window down to the floor idea. That's a great tactic for getting people out.
At that time, clearly they had some indication, I think, that the firefighter was down that end of the building, right?
Yeah.
Which is good from that perspective.
Yeah, they just didn't know he was in the basement yet.
Right.
At 11:42:19, command contacted fire dispatch and requested a box alarm assignment from the Metropolitan Fire Department nearby. At 11:43 hours, command advised the strategy was now defensive. Fire dispatcher called the Metropolitan Fire Department dispatcher and requested a box alarm respond to this incident for a missing firefighter at 11:43. At 11:49, the Metropolitan Fire Department dispatched Pumper 45, 42, 41, 36, Truck 15, Truck 11, Rescue 9, Rescue 3, Car 107, and Car 101. So heavy resources coming. At 12:09...
We're 45 minutes into the call here, guys.
Right. Yep. At 12:09, Car 107, the district chief from the Metropolitan Department, arrived on scene. At approximately 12:10, Car 107, the district chief, met with command to develop a strategy and an instant action plan to find and rescue the missing firefighter from Engine 52. At 12:13, Car 107 conducted a 360 walk around of the structure and said they heard multiple pass alarms sounding inside the structure. Car 107 advised command to have all firefighters turn off their SCBA cylinders and reset the pass alarms. Car 107 looked at into the basement. There was at least 6 inches of standing water on the basement floor and a fire in the void spaces. There were 3 hose lines in operation from the exterior, 2 on the Alpha side and 1 on the Delta side. At 12:13, the first box alarm assignment from the Metropolitan Fire Department started to arrive on scene. Once the companies from the Metropolitan Fire Department were in place and the incident action plan was communicated by Car 107, companies entered the basement. At 12:22 hours, Pumper 45 took an 1 3/4 hose line into the basement with Truck 15. Pumper 42 was operating a hose line on side Charlie. Truck 11 was assigned as Rick, and these companies used 2 hose lines already in place for attack. The basement was well involved, and Pumper 45 and Truck 15 worked to knock down the fire while searching with a thermal imager camera for the missing firefighters. Pumper 45 and Truck 15 found the firefighter submerged underwater and covered with debris. The missing firefighter was located near the wall on side Alpha, directly under the double windows in the kitchen dining room area. He was under a workbench on side Alpha, wall and table. He was found face down and his facepiece was not in place. The captain from Rescue 9 entered the basement via a ground ladder. The officer of Pumper 45 showed the captain where the missing firefighter was located in the basement. The captain stated he could hear the pass alarm sounding and could see the lights on the SCBA flashing. Rescue 9 had removed the double windows, including the studs above. The ground ladder was placed into the basement at 12:34. There was no radio comms between command and companies from the Metropolitan Fire Department until a radio patch was made. All companies then operated on Regional Communication 7 prior to the patch. Car 107 had to communicate on the fire ground through a mutual aid medic unit. So they didn't have same radio channels until that patch was worked. Something to think about for future planning. Pumper 45 and truck 15 came out of the basement due to being low on air at 12:36. At 12:37, car 101 assumed command of the incident. The incident action plan was changed from a rescue to a recovery. Car 107 was assigned as the recovery group supervisor. The incident action plan was integrate other companies, hold the fire with minimal water, companies sent into the basement to move debris off the missing firefighters. All members in the basement were to be on air. It's a long operation now. At 12:41, Rescue 9, Rescue 31 entered the basement via the ground ladder closest to the firefighter from engine 52. The fire was mostly under control by this time. Rescue 9 did not have a hose line with them. There was limited visibility due to smoke and steam. The water was 20 to 24 inches deep in the basement, and it was extremely hot. Rescue 9 had to move a lot of debris to get to the firefighter underneath the workbench. A carabiner was hooked to the firefighter's SCBA strap, and the members of Rescue 9 were able to pull the firefighter to the doorway at the Bravo Charlie side corner. During interviews with Pumper 45, Truck 15, Rescue 9, Rescue 31, all members stated they found the missing firefighter due to the pass alarm sounding. The auditory pass alarm was critical because the firefighter was not visible due to being submerged underwater and covered with the table and debris, so the thermal imaging camera couldn't see him. A Stokes basket was brought into the basement by Rescue 31. The firefighter was missing his helmet, a glove, his protective hood was pulled down around his neck. Rescue 9 and Rescue 31 packaged the firefighter in the Stokes basket. They silenced the pass alarm and prepared him to be removed from the basement at 12:59 hours. Rescue 9 and Rescue 31 had the firefighter out of the basement by 13:05. Rescues 9 and 31 were met by Medic 821, life flight, and a life flight nurse. The firefighter's SCBA was removed, and the firefighter was moved from the Stokes basket to a stretcher. He was in cardiac arrest and had burns to his face and hands. Members of the medic started CPR with advanced life support, transported to regional hospital at 13:08. Firefighter was pronounced deceased at 13:28 at the hospital. At 13:43, command advised the dispatcher the fire was now under control. At 17:05, the fire was placed out.
So we've had conversations before about RIT teams, RIC teams, whatever you call them in your department, and look at the amount of effort and the number of firefighters that were assigned to RIT on this particular call, and that were absolutely necessary. And you can really, this discussion of how much effort it is to actually do RIT, how big your RIT teams need to be, how well trained they must be, who needs to be involved in firefighter rescue and so forth. Goes back to Phoenix and Brent Tarver when he had something similar. Actually, he fell in the basement, and there was, I think it was a refrigerator or something that landed on him. But anyways, there was a massive amount of effort required. And so if you've got a RIT team of 2 firefighters that you've assigned to RIT on your incidents, you got to ask yourself whether that's adequate. And in this case, it clearly would not have been. They got at least 3 companies involved in doing this rescue. Rescue 9, Pumper 45, Rescue 31. So, these were all involved in doing this RIT on this particular one individual. RIT's not a small thing. It's a big resource demand, and it's got to be well organized and well commanded.
And you got to deal with the fire at the same time and the people and everything else. So that's why you really need to use ICS and sector off into sectors or divisions or groups to able to handle it, right? You need to be able to handle it. So that's what happened in Baltimore with the 3 firefighters in the row house. Is the chief became completely overwhelmed with the rescue operation because they had so many resources and they didn't establish divisions. They didn't maintain their ICS span of control, and therefore you had a whole bunch of freelancing, and it's inefficient and it consumes everything.
And they're doing this without proper radio comms in this case,
right?
too.
They didn't have comms with the other department, which should be worked out ahead of time. Chiefs, if you're listening to the podcast, you need to have comms with your other agencies. Actually, Alberta's discovering this right now because they established a new radio network here in Alberta for all emergency services to be able to use. And each local service had to establish which channels they wanted or didn't want from their neighbors. Instead of them mandating, you have to have these. And now they're finding, hey, hang on, we need to make sure we add more neighbors onto this system. So, I mean, you can go to switch to a provincial mutual aid channel, but that requires switching away from your own. Whereas if I just have your channel, then we can talk. And so they're actually redoing it here right now.
Right. A lot of guys looking at putting LA channels on now, I guess.
Yeah, right. Okay, exactly. With people from Wyoming going to Los Angeles, exactly.
So some of the recommendations here. Recommendation number 1 is a pretty basic command thing that I think we all know about already. Fire department should ensure that the first arriving resource assumes command, conducts a size up and a risk assessment, determines the incident strategy and the incident action plan, and is communicated over the initial radio report. At this incident, Engine 51 arrived on scene and the captain advised the dispatcher that there was gray smoke showing and that Engine 51 was investigating. The captain did not talk to the occupants, nor did the dispatcher advise that Engine 51 that everyone was out of the house. Don't know if that matters. The case comments did indicate that the fire was in the laundry room around the dryer. The captain tried to conduct a 360 but didn't go to the Delta side. The occupants tried to fight the fire for approximately 6 to 9 minutes before calling 911, which was also never communicated to Engine 51. Don't know if anybody knew that except them.
Yeah, I want to comment on the comment you made, Doug, in that, as we've seen before in these NIOSH reports, and there was an excerpt on one of my social media feeds about at a conference somewhere, and NIOSH was talking about these reports, and the chiefs in the room were saying, yeah, like those NIOSH reports are boring. It's always the same factors that affect these deaths. And Dirk said it too. NIOSH reports are very repetitive. And Vincent Dunn, one of the godfathers of the fire service, was there. And he says, that's because we haven't figured out different ways to kill firefighters. It's the same thing every time. It's a 360. It's a size up. It's what are the risk factors? Like, we keep doing the same thing over and over again. And that's why we do the podcast, is trying to reinforce it. Unfortunately, it is repetitive. We see the same problems. Radio comms, division, span of control, et cetera, et cetera.
We've got to learn from the experience of others. We can't individually learn these lessons individually because there isn't enough time and firefighters in the world to do that. We've got to learn them from others. So good for Vincent Dunn. Recommendation number 2, fire departments need to ensure that company officers and firefighters maintain crew integrity when operating in the hazard zone. So the discussion around this recommendation is that at this incident, Engine 51 members went into the basement together and then together moved to Side Alpha. The captain of Engine 51 and a firefighter from Engine 52, not of that company in other words, entered the house through the front door. The firefighter took the hose line into the front bedroom by himself and then took the hose line in a move towards the kitchen. The captain met the firefighter as he was entering the kitchen area. So the firefighter basically went in alone at first. The captain met the firefighter as he was entering the kitchen area, and the firefighter was then ahead of the captain, not with the captain, ahead of the captain as he entered into that kitchen area. The firefighter then fell through the kitchen floor into the basement. The captain was not next to him when that happened. The captain could not locate the firefighter from Engine 52. He just disappeared. He was not there. The firefighter from Engine 51 that had remained at the front door, and the captain then left the building. So they left the building together without the third firefighter. The captain didn't inform command that the firefighter from Engine 52 was missing for approximately 3 minutes.
3 fatal minutes.
Quite a long time. If a firefighter becomes separated and cannot be reconnected with his or her crew immediately, the firefighter should attempt to communicate via portable radio with the company officer. We don't know in this case whether the missing firefighter actually had a radio. They don't tell us that. If reconnection is not accomplished after 3 radio attempts or reconnection does not take place within 1 minute, then they should declare a mayday. It is the responsibility of every firefighter and company officer to stay in communication or at least contact with crew members at all times by visual observation, voice connection, or touch while operating in a hazard zone. I've been in situations where I had my hand firmly wrapped around the SCBA harness of the junior firefighter in front of me. More,
Absolutely.
yeah, less experienced firefighter. And it's important to know where your crew is all the time. All firefighters should maintain the unity of command by operating under the direction of an incident commander or a division group supervisor, like maybe, on the backside or the basement or whatever, or their company officer at all times. The ultimate responsibility for crew integrity and ensuring that no crew member gets separated or lost, that rests with the company officer who is leading that particular tactical operation. If crew integrity is lost and firefighters are placed at increased risk, and a mayday should be called if any member cannot be accounted for, as we've described ahead.
And I'd have to go back to see where was the officer off 52, because he was in the house. 52 was in with the officer from 51 in the house. So obviously,
I'm sorry. Was there an officer at 52?
I thought so. There's only two, officer and a chauffeur, maybe firefighter and chauffeur. Maybe
that's what I think.
Two people on the truck. So
that's
the one guy was on the truck getting the hydrant.
Right.
Yep. No, crew integrity, and that was a big pet peeve of mine when I was active in the fire service with part-time on-call departments, especially was crew integrity, and that's why I went ahead and bought the little identifiers for all the SCBAs. I wanted to get the magnetic helmet identifiers so that command could look at any one time and make sure you were with your unit, and if you weren't, you wanted to be able to answer for it. Yeah. Keep those, because that's who's going to save you. It's your buddies.
Yeah. But it's a bigger risk in departments, for instance, who don't fully crew their trucks. So, in fact, a firefighting crew that arrives at the scene actually arrives on separate vehicles, maybe even out of separate stations, as in this particular case. So you're making up crews from various resources.
You are correct. I just looked back. Engine 52 was a chauffeur and a firefighter, so no officer.
Right. So the chauffeur stayed with the truck. The firefighter was standing by the front door waiting to go in. Yeah. Officer 51 went in with them, but not close, and lost them.
Yeah. So in those departments, for instance, where you don't actually have an integral crew that, is in the station together, mounts the truck together, rides the truck together, gets off the truck together, goes to work together, where you're pulling in guys from other stations, other rigs to make up your crews, you got to be particularly diligent about crew integrity if that's the way you operate in your department due to staffing. They seem to have fallen down on that point here.
That happens in Alberta a lot because there's a lot of rigs here that even in our two major cities only have two people on them. So lots of times the officer off of one of them takes the guys off the back of a different truck to go do a task because the officer of the first truck is command or something like that.
Yep.
And it's a fundamental component of the volunteer fire service. Not every volunteer fire service assembles at the station, gets on the truck together in a crew, and then runs the call. There's a lot of departments out there that run private operated vehicles to the call. And I've run departments both ways. And, when your guys are wandering into the site, out of their private vehicle over several minutes, you've really got to have a strong system for accounting for them, putting them together in crews, having officers responsible for certain members, keeping your accountability system so you know who is working with who, and maintaining that integrity to the call. It's got to really work well, or something like this can happen.
That was one of my biggest pet peeves when I was on the department with you, Paul. Thankfully, we didn't have a lot of privately owned vehicle response. We all went to the hall and went on the truck, but one truck would have 6 people and 3 of them were officers, and it would drive out the door. And the next truck would have 2 2-year firefighters. It would drive out the door. And I was like, we need to form instead of having 6 and 2, go 4 and 4 and give them both an officer, and you have a workable, assignable company. But that was too complicated for the.
No, you were very vocal about that. I remember that, which is good, right?
But nobody wanted to hear it. They just our way's good. Nothing goes wrong. We're fine.
Yeah. Exactly.
When I was a volunteer, that's exactly what we did, Doug. The second officer in the door got the second truck, not the first.
And when I was an officer,
it certainly didn't drive.
There was times that I was like the first person in the building, and I was the officer of the second or third truck because other officers or guys would show up, and I would, when I was in charge, like when I could control what would happen, I made sure
Step
that
back.
trucks had the right people on them.
Yeah, exactly right. Anyway, something to think about, Chiefs. More than think about. Do something about.
Number 3 should ensure that all companies are operating based on the assignment given by the incident commander. The task, location, objective assignment should be communicated over the radio, which prevents freelancing and ensures the tactical priorities are met. At this incident, command did not communicate any kind of an IAP prior to arrival or upon arrival. Engine 51 was never given an assignment by command to go to the basement or to move to Site Alpha. Command met with Engine 51 in the front yard. Command told Engine 51 to try to locate the fire near the dryer in the utility room. The IAP is a methodical process that ensures life safety, incident stabilization, and property conservation. Assigning the tactics in order of accomplishment will aid in the coordination of fireground activities. Companies should communicate their progress reports on the tactical objectives that are given to them by command as they complete the tactical priorities. The incident commander needs to use the following structure when assigning any unit into the hazard zone: the initial IAP, the tasks of the initial arriving unit, location of the tasks, objective of the tasks. Just, I hate to go over this. We've said it a million times, but it's important. When assigning companies to areas that may have units already assigned, the incident commander should have informed the newly assigned unit to whom it will report to or work under. The incident commander needs to inform the division or group supervisor of the newly assigned companies. I listened to this on the radio this week in LA at the Palisades fire. Ops section chief was doing exactly that. Hey, Division Y or Division T, I am sending you, strike team 257 or 1054 or whatever. They did it over and over and over again. And it's how it should be. That's how we don't kill firefighters. These little things are what doesn't kill firefighters.
It's easy to do when you're on these big departments that have lots and lots of chiefs that can go to calls. It's a little harder when you have one chief or two chiefs and one safety or something, and you don't have chiefs in charge of areas, and you're just assigning multiple companies to the third floor. Captains don't usually report to captains who are already commanding their own crew, right? You usually have different captains because you usually have different captains worrying about their own crew because their job is the company officer, and they report as captains to a chief.
If whoever's ops section chief or whoever's in charge of that making those assignments, so I'm sending engine 25 to the second floor. They're already working on the second floor. They're doing search or fire control or whatever. If I send engine 23 to the second floor, it behooves me to say, engine 23, go to the second floor. You're going to report to engine 25. Engine 25, this is command. I'm sending you engine 23. They're going to work with you or under you. That is normal procedure because you've just taken two guys off of my command roster. I only have to talk to one. 25. 25 is in charge of 23. I don't have to talk to 23 anymore. He's been assigned. It's basic ICS, and we need to practice it every day.
But in this particular case, I think it's much simpler than that. What has to happen is your first arriving officer, who was the officer, the captain, who was in fact the shift commander, because he was the only officer on shift for the career guys, the three career guys at that time. I mean, he needs to say, I'm in command. I'm in, offensive, search and rescue, whatever mode I am in. I'm doing it in the basement, or I'm doing it on the first floor. And my objective is to do a primary, or my objective is to do an investigation, or my objective is to do whatever. And engine 52, you're coming in behind me. Your assignment is to do this there. And this is what I want you to do: establish a water supply, send a firefighter to support my team, whatever the case may be. It doesn't look like much of that actually happened at this incident. And then when more and more companies, and I think early on you mentioned there was something like 18 firefighters at the scene initially.
Yeah, they had 23.
They all needed jobs, and they all needed to be assigned, and clearly the recommendations indicate that a lot of that did not happen.
Exactly.
So some fundamentals. Yep. And I know a lot of times the assumption is, wow, this is just a little house, I mean, How lost can you get? Fatally
Exactly.
lost is the answer.
Yep. Yep.
Fire departments need to ensure that critical incident benchmarks are communicated to the incident commander throughout the incident. At this incident, no incident benchmarks were communicated to command. This includes entering the basement, the conditions encountered in the basement, and then moving to the Alpha side, unable to locate the fire on the first floor, and the firefighter from Engine 52 is missing. Company officers should communicate with the incident commander when benchmarks are met or not met. This is an essential element of the IAP because this process allows command to consider and account for changing fireground conditions. Moreover, command must be able to forecast the direction of the incident in order to stay ahead of the fire. Without this information, the incident action plan becomes out of sequence with the phase of the fire. Once an incident benchmark has been met, the IC is obligated to communicate this information to all companies operating at the incident. Fire departments should consider incident management system training and certification program for company officers that prepare members for dynamic events that they will encounter. This program will benefit officers who serve in the role of incident commander, as well as those who supervise and manage incident and hazard zone operations for everyday local national incident management system type 4, type 5 and type 4 incidents. For all members operating at an incident scene, radio discipline is essential. All members should receive training on and use the thought process of, is my transmission necessary, as part of their fireground behavior. It is necessary to reserve all radio transmissions for relevant messages such as benchmarks, CAN reports, PAR, safety concerns or issues, and needed resources, changing conditions, emergency traffic, and maydays. Members should refrain from transmissions that add little information to the IAP. And even if you're communicating something that is important, use few words. Don't tell them a story. Tell them the point and get to the point.
Recommendation number 5. Fire departments should use NFPA 1700 Guide for Structural Firefighting to develop and revise their fireground operational procedures. So NFPA 1700 is largely based on firefighting research studies conducted by the National Institute of Standards and Technology, NIST. Also by the Underwriters Laboratories Fire Safety Research Institute, FSRI. So you'll see references quite a lot to those too. So NIST and ULFSRI have conducted a series of live burn experiments designed to replicate conditions in modern homes and other residential structures. This research is to validate testing which occurred in laboratory settings. The results of these experiments enable firefighters to better predict and react to the effects of fires in these types of occupancies. These are fundamentals of firemanship. If you don't know or can't predict to some degree of accuracy what's going on at a fire, then you need to, get more experience or more education. And this is one way to do it. You can get it accurately this way.
I can't emphasize enough the free training on ULFSRI's training website. Like, you can take courses there, and it's just extra material for you to know your enemy, the building and the fire, because it's changing.
Yeah. Get information in your slide deck in your head, like it just, slides.
Exactly.
I've seen this before. Oh yeah, they talked about this on that show we saw. Right, I get it now.
Exactly.
And it's particularly if you're in a small service that doesn't go to a lot of calls, you're just not going to get your call experience if you don't do these types of things.
Yeah, there's so much free training available on the web now. It just blows my mind from an old guy that couldn't get training, that there's so much out there that's really easy to access and to use.
Guys, if you're not taking advantage of this stuff, you have no idea what impact this kind of... I wish we'd had this when I was younger.
I know, me too. Recommendation number 6. Fire departments should develop and implement standard operating procedures and operating guidelines for tactical operations involving modular homes. At this incident, the fire department did not have an SOP or SOG for tactical operations that were involving a modular home. Manufactured and modular dwellings are built off-site and may not have the same fire resistance as site-built structures. Fire may propagate rapidly due to the geometry and construction materials of the building. These structures may be susceptible to early failure due to lightweight building materials. Just something to be aware of, that they are different, and have your spiny senses alerted that it's going to be different. I didn't know about that finger joist really, or had forgotten. And the MDF floors, like, that's crazy. MDF is, I don't know. But anyway,
Think about what you would do at a fire in a mobile home or a trailer park model home. And you don't treat that like a regular house fire because it's not built the same way.
exactly.
But that it's not a regular house. This
Yeah.
one looked
Yeah,
very
it's more
much like
it's
a
more
regular
obvious,
house.
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's more obvious, Doug. You're right.
They're most of the time they're grouped together with a nice little sign that says Sunnyvale Trailer Park. So
Yeah.
it's a trailer park.
It's where the tornadoes try to go.
Yeah. Recommendation number 7 is fire departments should review and update their SOGs for tactical operations involving below grade fires. At this incident, the fire department did not have a standard operating procedure or standard operating guideline for fighting basement fires. Recognizing a below grade fire is essential to ensuring that proper strategy and tactical objectives are developed for an incident. These types of fires are low frequency, high risk events for several reasons. Below grade fires sometimes are difficult to initially detect. Sometimes they're difficult to access and require adequate staffing for hose line placement, operation, and ventilation. In addition, firefighters may be working over the fire. During below grade fire operations, every firefighter should remember 2 key issues: access and ventilation. Access includes how easily a firefighter can get water in and how they can make an attack via a window or door. Ventilation may not exist in a below grade area. There may be residential structures with no exterior vents to the basement or below grade area. The main path for air and smoke to move through the home will be from the basement up the stairs towards an open door or window above grade. If the fire has not penetrated into the structure, you will see bidirectional flow at the doorway. The air supply to the fire is inefficient and limited. Therefore, the potential for flashover is reduced when no exterior vents to the basement are present. Below grade fires are one of the most challenging situations firefighters encounter. As with all fires, the use of a risk assessment and occupant survivability profile, I hate that term, can evaluate what is at risk, lives or property. Fire departments should conduct a post-incident analysis for significant incidents, especially following below-grade fires. Findings from these analyses can help in determining the department's SOPs and SOGs.
Big thing here is, there was no one in the house. It was hoarding conditions.
Well, they didn't know there was no one in the house, but you should never just show up and say, "Oh, everyone's out, okay."
But I agree with you. You never know until you know for sure. But really, what's your best source of information on what's going on? The people standing in front of the house. Hi, where's the fire? Is everybody out? Those are basically the 2 questions that come out of the first officer's mouth almost every time, in my experience. Where's the fire? Is everybody out? You ask those questions, Doug, at fires. So, why wasn't it asked this time?
Yeah, it's
Strange.
hard to know with where the people were when they arrived, and
we shouldn't be second guessing, but it does tell us that didn't happen. So why is an interesting question. Anyway, recommendation number 8, and we're going to want to talk about this a little bit, but fire departments should develop and implement SOPs, SOGs, and training programs and specific tactics for wind-impacted fires. So at this incident, the fire department did not have an SOP, SOG, or tactics developed for wind-impacted fires. So based on the analysis of this fire incident and results from current research and field studies like the NIST stuff and ULFSRI stuff we talked about, you need to adjust firefighting tactics to account for wind conditions in structural firefighting, and it's critical to enhance the safety and effectiveness of firefighters. Wind-impacted fire may be one of the most dangerous operations firefighters will encounter. The term wind-impacted fire is used to describe a fire in which the wind has the potential to, or is already causing a dramatic and sudden increase in fire, heat, and smoke. Just look at LA as we speak. Experienced fire officers and firefighters who have survived wind-impacted fires have all described the following conditions upon arrival. That looks routine. Within seconds, fire, heat, and smoke conditions changed without warning from routine to life-threatening, meaning life-threatening to the firefighters. an operating 2.5 hose line that is flowing from the downwind position into the exhaust portion of the flow, in other words, it's coming at you, has had little to no effect on the incredible heat that's being produced. However, flowing water into the intake or the upwind side of a fire into the flow path is very effective. Water mixes in with the air, has a much more positive impact. Directly attacking these fires with one or even two 2.5-inch hose lines proved ineffective and ultimately led to firefighters incurring serious injuries. FDNY incidents from 2013 proved that. Wind impacted fires have resulted in firefighter line of duty deaths in single story, single family homes. This one, in other words. And there was some there's a video, I think, on NIST that's called the simulation of the dynamics of a wind-driven fire in a ranch-style house, where they look at this scenario and they show that it's extremely dangerous.
Yeah, the two
So
firefighters in
early,
Texas. Two firefighters in
yeah,
Texas were killed when the patio
yeah,
doors on the windward side failed, and
yeah.
they got caught in the chimney.
Yeah. It may be a little confusing for our listeners, because earlier on in this NIOSH investigation, they said this wasn't a wind impacted fire until later,
Until later,
until after
until
the fire.
the collapse. Yeah.
Yeah. So let's talk about that for a second, if we could, Paul, because I think it's important to recognize when things changed. So when they first went down on arrival, they went down to the basement door, and they said that they couldn't really see much smoke. There was some. And then later on, they said that they could see smoke issuing from the upper half of the door. So what's happening there? There's wind behind them, 33-mile-an-hour wind. That's a pretty significant wind. So it's behind them and it's pushing fresh oxygen into that building, and it's going in the lower half of the door, feeding the fire, which is producing heat, gases, smoke, and that's pouring back out the top of the fire. So what do they do after that? Then they go and they open up the door on the alpha side. So now you're allowing air to go in that basement door, and if there's a hole in the floor, which there isn't yet,
It's close.
then the fire could come up and ventilate through that front door. So the firefighter does go in and he falls through a hole in the floor. So essentially, when he falls through the floor and breaks the floor or the holes there, now you've got a ventilation path that starts at the door in the basement in the windward side of the house, which is the Bravo side, blows through the basement where the fire actually is, and then up through the hole in the floor, and then comes back out the front door. So now your fire is going to start to intensify because now it has a floor path. It's basically you've opened up the damper on the chimney on your wood stove, for those of you who have wood stoves. So now it's starting to flow. So they lose track of their firefighter. Then they go to the front bay windows, which is more towards the delta side of the alpha, and they cut the side of the building all the way down to the floor and open a hole in the floor to the basement. Now you've got a perfect wind path, and it goes in the basement door on the windward side, the Bravo side, all the way through the basement, past the fire, and out through the hole they've created on the alpha side. And they tell you right there that they try to go down a ladder they put in, but the heat is way too intense. They cannot get down there. So it's gone from practically nothing showing to, oh my God, we got a major fire in the basement. We can't even get in there, and we've lost somebody, all within 15 minutes.
Yeah,
And
all
very
that
much a
material,
wind-driven fire at that point.
the building material and the material in the home, which there's indications to lead it was heavy content fire,
Yes.
is all now burning because you gave it
Yes.
air and it had heat,
Yes.
and you can't get enough water into it.
Yes. And then they continue to leave that basement door open and continue to bring hose lines and search efforts in that door. And you would say, well, you've got to do that because you're looking for a downed firefighter. But they might have actually reduced the intensity of that fire by closing the basement door.
Maybe. Yep.
Yeah, it's hard to know. You'd have to try it to
That's
see
right.
if you
We
got a
weren't there.
result.
That's why NIST does all that
Yeah.
research, and you can watch the studies and watch the results and their evaluations of it. That's why the whole thing is there.
So that's why this recommendation is there. Yeah, that's why this recommendation is there.
That's right. Recommendation number 9. This is my pet peeve. Fire departments should ensure incident commanders establish a stationary command post that's tied to a vehicle for effective incident management, which includes the use of a tactical worksheet or writing on the truck or a whiteboard or something just to keep track of who's doing what to where and why. Incident command did not utilize a command vehicle, did not utilize a tactical worksheet, which aids in maintaining the incident action plan and personnel accountability. And when there was only 2 or 3 crews there, it's not bad. But as soon as things went downhill, all of a sudden we had, I don't know, there was like 6 engines and tankers and stuff there. And then we called the Metropolitan Department with a whole bunch more. And all of a sudden it got big. And then you're lost. The command officer,
You can't
battalion
wait
chief,
till
district
then.
chief.
You can't wait till then to start writing shit down.
Yeah,
You
got
need to
have a
have it from
system.
the beginning so that,
Yep.
yes, when it's 2 or 3 units, it's easy. Throw the paper out, no big deal. But
Yep.
you need to have that started for when it becomes 7, 10, 15 units, because you're never going to
Exactly.
catch up.
Exactly. No, and no, where are those people? Who's missing? Where did I send them? I can't remember. Who's here? What
Which
radio
means
channel are they
yeah,
on? Whatever.
yeah. Which means you need lots of practice. And you
Yes,
get practice by doing it at the insignificant fires.
exactly.
That's where you get the practice.
Yeah. So, command officer should automatically assume standard stationary exterior remote command position and immediately assume command. The IC should function inside their vehicle. This is my own pet peeve, inside their vehicle, or it does give you the option, very popular in the warmer climates, at the rear of the vehicle with a command board or a tactical worksheet. I like the inside the vehicle. It's climate controlled. You can make it quiet. You can focus on the radio and what you see out the window. Number 10.
The fire department should incorporate the principles of command safety into the incident management system. This ensures that the strategic level safety responsibilities are incorporated into the command functions throughout the incident. The purpose of command safety is to provide the IC with the necessary resources to use, follow, and incorporate safety into the incident management system at all incidents. Command safety is used as part of the 8 functions of the command developed by Paul's hero, Fire Chief Alan Brunacini. Command safety is designed to describe how IC must use their regular everyday command functions to complete the strategic level safety responsibilities during incident operations. Using the command functions creates an effective way and a close connection between incident safety and incident command.
And I made you read it. That worked out really well. I like it.
Command safety sounds like some kind of secret decoder wording and language. What is that? I think the simple way to look at this is that if there's 2 ways to doing it and one way's safer than the other, pick the safer way. That's really what they're saying. Think about the impact on your guys, of your firefighters. If there's a safer way to do something that's effective, then do it that way. But when I walk down a set of stairs carrying a laundry basket, what's the first thing you do, or I do? First of all, I make sure I'm not going to slip on my slippers, and I look at the stairs to make sure there's nothing on the stairs that's going to cause an accident. So,
Yep.
if I don't do that and I go down the stairs and I fall, I haven't exercised command safety because I never looked ahead. So,
But
really,
we fall into that,
all the
rush
time.
in and take over,
Yeah.
and we don't size it
Yeah.
up first.
Yeah, ready, aim, shoot. I get it. Or
Yep.
ready, shoot, aim.
Yeah.
Recommendation 11. Fire departments should ensure that all firefighters and fire officers are trained for Mayday operations. The ability of a firefighter to call a Mayday is a complicated behavior, and that includes the affective, cognitive, and psychomotor domains of learning and performance. Ouch, my head hurts. But it's got to do with muscle memory as much as anything, and being comfortable in your head about doing it, and not being called a sissy later, I guess, is part of it, right? So any delay in calling a Mayday reduces the chance of survival and increases the risk to other firefighters who are trying to rescue the downed firefighter. So not only is a delay in calling Mayday going to jeopardize the firefighter who's in trouble, it jeopardizes everybody who's coming to get that firefighter, because the fire is doing what? It's getting worse.
growing.
The building structure is getting more unstable. The risks are increasing. The water is getting deeper in the basement. Firefighters should have 100% confidence in their competency to declare a Mayday. Fire departments should ensure that any personnel who enter a hazard zone meet the department's standards for Mayday competency through their active duty service. You're competent to wear an air pack. You should be competent to call a Mayday. You need to be trained. A RIC, which is a rapid intervention crew, typically is not activated until the Mayday is declared. Any delay in calling a mayday reduces the window of survivability and increases the risk to the RIC. There's some conversation about this in NFPA 1561, which is part of the NFPA firefighter safety standards. Worth a read.
Yeah, and I mean it increases the risk to RIC because the conditions are deteriorating, right? The longer the delays, the radio didn't work. He didn't know he lost his guy in front of him in this example for reference sake.
Yep. And look at the work they had to do to get him, to find him and get him out.
Yeah.
It was no longer a house fire. It was rescue our guy.
Recommendation 13, fire departments should ensure all members and dispatchers are trained in the safety features of their portable radio, particularly features that might be useful during a mayday. At this incident, due to issues with portable radios freewheeling, several portable radios were turned off. The department portable radios have a functional emergency alert button. The firefighter from Engine 52 did not use his emergency alert button.
So the term freewheeling was a new one on me. I hadn't heard that one.
You had to look that up, didn't you?
I did. I confessed to putting on my my beanie with the spinner on top, and I went looking for freewheeling. And it's a tendency of some radios, control knobs, to not stay where they're put. So you rub up against something, and the knob goes to the off position. So your volume, or turns the volume down. My wife has the same issues with her cell phone. She's always hitting the wrong button and turning the volume off. So when we're lost in Sobeys, I can't find her. Or
I thought you were going to say her hearing assistance device, so she can't hear you. But
that's called selective hearing.
That's what I have.
So freewheeling actually is a real problem, and I just sent you, Paul, a link to a device that I'm seeing all over social media now. It's an adjunct you can add on top of your radio that will shield the buttons, the controls, the knobs on top of your radio for firefighters, particularly for those who can't afford to get proper radios.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no,
it's a great idea.
Pre-made thing.
Yeah, it's a great idea.
I would go one step further than what this says. And not only should they get a radio, the radio should have a microphone on it, a lapel mic.
Speaker mic.
So they have
absolutely. And a radio strap.
You have two options to push the push to talk, and you have two options to push the emergency alert button, especially if you're wearing it properly. So if you're in a collapse like this firefighter, and perhaps one arm isn't usable or one part of your radio isn't usable or are free to access, it gives you another option.
Exactly. Yep. No, well said, Doug.
They're not cheap, let me tell you.
No,
yeah, neither are funerals.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, there's the old saying, you don't know the cost of safety until you've had somebody killed.
A line of duty death. Yep. So, like turnout gear and SCBA, the portable radio assists firefighters in operating in the hazard zone. Therefore, each firefighter should be equipped with a portable radio and trained on its use and safety features. This training process should extend to the department's dispatchers because dispatchers are the critical component of the response and responsible for designating a channel for emergency alert button transmission, etc. Yeah, dispatchers are critical. I can't remember what the last episode we did too. It was a dispatch issue, right? Was they didn't know what was going on, and so dispatchers need to be trained and need to practice with the firefighters.
So some people may not understand why it says that the dispatcher is responsible for that. That's because those emergency alert buttons key up the radio to transmit a code. It's a digital code. And those codes cannot be deciphered by other radios on scene. They have to go to the computer at the dispatch center. And the computer in the dispatch center is the one that can read the code, says it's radio such and such. So that's the reason the dispatch center is so important in that. And if the dispatch center is not monitoring the channel that you're broadcasting that on, oops.
Yep.
All you're going to know is maybe there's an audible tone. You might hear the tone if you're on scene. That's all you're going to know. You won't have any idea who it is, but the dispatchers will. So if the dispatcher doesn't hear it because it's not on the right channel, or they're not monitoring maybe all the channels or whatever the case may be, there's a problem. And when you're using local tactical channels, right, that only work within a certain area, don't transmit all the way to the dispatch center, these EABs become a problem because if you're on a TAC channel and you press the EAB, that radio needs to be programmed to go to the dispatch channel. So you can do all of those things. So you need to be thinking ahead when you buy your radios to make sure it has the right features, like Doug was talking about, speaker mics with EABs, emergency alert buttons on them. And you need to be thinking about the guy who's programming it. Don't get your radio guy to do the programming for you and just give you the radios and think that it's all good. It's not usually, because he's just a radio guy. He's not a firefighter. You need to make sure that it is programmed exactly the way you want it. And you need to be thinking about what you want to have happen exactly. So you need to work all of that out. So there's an awful lot of that in that one sentence.
The next recommendation is basically saying that a fire chief should have a chief's aide, like we've talked about many times, but fire department should use a functional personnel accountability system, required a designated accountability officer or resource status officer. Perfect job for the guy that drove you there.
Mm-hmm.
At this incident, no one was assigned as accountability officer or resource status officer. The Metropolitan Fire Department instituted a personnel accountability system when their members entered the hazard zone. A personnel accountability system is a system that readily identifies both the location and function of all members operating at an incident scene. The philosophy of the personnel accountability system starts with the same principles of an incident management system: the company unity and unity of command. It is possible to fulfill unity initially and maintain it throughout the incident by documenting the situation status and resource status on a tactical worksheet or a resource status accountability board. I mean, I completely agree with what this is saying, but I understand that we're talking about happen at a small fire department with limited initial resources, and they probably didn't have like the nearest city coming. So I get that you don't have all the people there to fill all these jobs, and it could be overwhelming. But what's your job then? Is to have automatic aid so that you have more people coming when you have little fires that could go bad.
You could have non-1001 older people respond with the department and fill these roles that aren't in the hazard zone. But you could have your 64-year-old retired fire chief go as a driver or just show up in his POV to fill that role once he can get there, right? He or she. So
I accept on two levels
to do this. There are ways to do
this.
Yeah.
I accept on going to those jobs, and I accept being 64 again.
Exactly. Yeah, you want to be 64 again. Yeah, young like me.
Recommendation 16. Fire departments should regularly review and revise their SOP SOGs on the deployment of rapid intervention crews, RIT teams, whatever you call them in your department. So at this particular incident, there were no RIT assigned with the original department. It wasn't until the Metropolitan Department arrived on scene that a RIT group from the Metropolitan Fire Department was set up, and they were able to remove the downed firefighter, but under very difficult conditions. So at all fireground operations, at least one RIT crew should be designated and available to respond before an interior attack operation begins. The size and complexity of the incident will determine the number of rapid intervention crews to utilize. I can hear all the small departments out there saying, okay, we need an incident commander, we need sector commanders, we need officers, we need an aide or an accountability person, and now we need a RIT crew. That's more than we would turn out to the incident all told, and there's nobody dealing with the incident. So those are all valid comments and really are concerns of smaller departments who maybe only turn out 6, 8, 10 people to a fire. But really, with those levels of staffing, you should not be going in to structural fires in the first place without additional assistance. And small departments generally have a pretty extensive mutual aid network, and that's where the mutual aid companies are tapped to come in and set up RIT teams. And in cases where, for instance, there's a suspected or confirmed structure fire, which I think was this case, those mutual aid responses are more like automatic aid. The dispatcher will turn right around and page them also. And back to your theory, it's just diesel. Yeah.
That
Okay. So you got the
seems-
guy up at 4 a.m. and yeah. Okay. So he's going to have a bum day at work the next day because you turned him around. He didn't actually get to fight the fire, but because it turned out to be nothing, but it's worth it. You've got to do it. And these guys were
that's-
like 45 minutes into the fire before they called the Metropolitan Department. So there was lots of time for mutual aid to get there. And in fact, mutual aid did get there.
Yeah, the rule in British Columbia is you must have RIT set up within 10 minutes or before the second crew goes in. So one crew can go in, the first arriving engine, but the second crew can't go in unless RIT is established on scene. And that's
Right.
the law in British Columbia.
Right.
And yeah, exactly. That's what we did in Clearwater. We had multiple stations. Anytime it was a real fire, we responded 2 or 3 stations every time
Yeah.
because you can
Yeah.
always send them home. It's just diesel fuel. And
Yeah.
that way you can keep it going, right?
Yeah. So the old guideline of 2 in, 2 out, and still a lot of departments use it. It's not adequate. If you got a structure fire, it is not adequate. It's adequate to spray water through a window, try to do an exterior reset. It's adequate for establishing water supplies, doing a lot of those things. But a single family fire, it's been shown you need, NIST has shown this, 14 people on scene as a minimum. And that's only if things are going relatively well and it's a single family, single floor dwelling like this is. This is effectively a 2-floor because the fire was kind of in the basement, kind of.
Yep,
So,
exactly.
yeah, if you don't have the staff to do this and you're not organized to do interior structural firefighting safely, then you shouldn't be doing it. And your public needs to know that. And easy for me to say,
Fire department should review and or develop SOGs, SOPs to ensure water supply is established during initial fireground operations, particularly in areas with limited or no hydrants. At this incident, the district did not have an SOP or SOG for water supply in areas with limited or no hydrants. The establishment of water supply at a fireground, of course, is critical operations benchmark in areas with limited or no hydrants. So pre-planning process is needed. In addition, this information should be shared with your automatic and mutual aid companies. We used to put it on our I Am Responding or Active 911 app where the hydrants were, the water supplies were, and we also shared it with our neighboring departments so that if mutual aid was coming, they might be able to pull up where our hydrants were. So that's just something that's easier to do nowadays with all the electronic tools and systems we have, but it's very important to do that.
Recommendation 18, fire departments should ensure that all members engaged in emergency operations, in other words, firefighting in this case, receive annual proficiency training and evaluation on fireground operations, including in this live fire training. And a lot of live fire training that I was to in the younger years meant setting the house on fire and standing around outside and spraying water on it. If that's what you do as a department, you're an exterior attack department, then that is good. But if you're an interior attack department, that is not adequate. You've got to do better than that. So this training should be conducted with their automatic or mutual aid departments also. So it's not good enough to know what you're doing yourself, because if you're not staffed adequately to handle any fire that could come your way, name me a department that is, then you need to be getting those other folks involved. So the fire protection district involved in this incident did not require annual live fire training. Also, the guy who lost his life in this fire had only been with the department for about 6 weeks.
Right.
So, but he was a career guy, right? So could you take a new guy in and say, well, you're on strength now, but you're not doing any interior firefighting, despite the fact we've only got 3 guys. You're one of the 3, and you can't do anything until you prove to us that you can do it.
Tough decisions for the fire
Tough
chief.
decision, and I can tell you which way the decision's going to go. But in this case, it might not have been a good.
So let's talk a little bit about the recovery process. We've covered a whole bunch of issues that happened on this, and that's why I looked at this example. This incident is a relatively simple building, very common. They're everywhere. This could happen anywhere. Kind of call. Let's look at it, and there's a lot of good lessons that come out of it. So in the recovery process, the Fire Protection District implemented many changes. These changes were based on the department's critique of what happened and information gained through NIOSH and fire prevention, the Fire Prevention Injury Program field investigation that generates these reports. The following actions the Fire Protection District took since January 5th, 2020. New handheld radios and microphones, Doug, were purchased for all on-call on all apparatus. These radios, latest version handheld fire radios from Motorola, Motorola did a lot of research on radios to prevent freewheeling and all the problems that we're coming up with. Training was provided at the time of placing them in service and provided annually. Bluetooth microphones were purchased and installed in the face masks to pair with the radios. Utilizing IAFF Training Association's Resource 1, the department conducts monthly classroom training and drills, and this is to ensure all members are reviewing the basics as well as staying current with updated techniques. SCBA Confidence course has been constructed to give firefighters more time to work on their turnout gear in SCBA. The training focused on Mayday scenarios and firefighter down situations. A new Mayday policy was written and implemented, was conducted with input from Fire Dispatch Center. Department is training with all mutual aid companies, ensuring all resources are properly trained and utilize the procedures of the new policy. An operational battalion chief position was funded and appointment was made. The battalion chief is assigned a 40-hour work week with a take-home vehicle so they can go after hours. The battalion chief responds to all structure fires, and as requested, this position allows for faster rate of response of a command officer to incidents. The personnel accountability system policy has been reviewed and training is provided. And prior to implementation of this new policy, accountability boards are placed in all command vehicles. An emphasis has been placed on exterior fire attack while waiting for adequate units to arrive on scene before making an interior attack. The adherence to 2 in, 2 out for interior attacks has been communicated and is being included in fireground operations training. A lot of the stuff that we did in Clearwater when I was out there is exactly the same recommendations. The training budget was doubled to allow firefighters to attend more outside training. Captains and above are sent to National Fire Academy in Emmitsburg to receive leadership and incident management training. The automatic and mutual aid departments are responding battalion chiefs to all automatic or mutual aid requests for structure fires. This allows vital positions within the incident management system to be utilized on the fire ground. I remember that when we would do mutual aid and we said we always send one of our chief officers or captains with it, and other people complain like, why are you doing that? That's a waste. No, I need a manager there to take care of my guys to make sure stuff's being handled correctly. New thermal imagers were purchased to include smaller thermal imagers, so each apparatus or vehicle has a thermal imager. Classroom and practical training was provided through Missouri University Fire Rescue Training Institute. Countywide meetings are held to develop a plan for the use of tactical channels and how to patch radio channels together. Additional training was provided to all members on radio comms. A review of the incident management system was conducted with all members. A part-time training officer position was added to oversee the conduct training and drills, and a full-time and part-time personnel have been hired to raise staffing from 5 per shift to 6 per shift. So a lot of good stuff, unfortunately, after this incident, but at least there's some learning out of it, which is why we do the podcast.
Certainly is. And a sad story, really. This looks like a simple fire, and we've been to hundreds of these in our careers, hundreds, literally.
Yep.
And this one turned out to not be so simple.
Exactly. Doug, any last words?
Not really. It's nice to see lots of the stuff that we talked about as we were going, they actually implemented after the fact. So it's nice to see that. Although it takes these tragic events to create these changes, it's nice that they do make the change.
So lessons learned, and they were implemented in this case, which is good. It's not just identified.
Yeah. And there's a side benefit to this. So not only has this department learned some valuable lessons and implemented some changes, these flow out beyond that department to their mutual aid partners and across the county. And I'm sure there's not too many departments in this corner of Missouri who do not know about this incident and what happened there and what they needed to do. And I'm sure these guys are out at their mutual aid meetings talking about it and inviting people to participate with them. And if they can establish that critical mass of learning from this and interest from this, they could most likely save a life.
Yeah, exactly.
And you should too by listening. Yeah. We should all learn from this.
That's why we're all here. Okay, well, thank you everybody for listening to another Emergency Traffic Podcast episode. If you enjoy these, please tell a friend. let's be safe out there.
Take care, everybody.
Stay low and go.
Doug's helpers are going to say goodbye.
Bye. Bye. Bye.
Bye.